Thanks for all your efforts to answer these questions. It's now time to continue with our next speaker, and that is Mr. Joost Klein Herenbrink. Joost is born and raised on a dairy farm in the Netherlands, not too far away from where we are here, and that is in Arnhem. He's been working for CRV for more than 15 years, and in recent years, Joost and his team have been responsible for the introduction of novel traits like, for example, feed efficiency and ketosis. And those traits have made CRV into one of the leading companies when it comes to health and efficiency. Now, Joost, we asked the audience what share of the total performance of a dairy cow can be related to genetic level. About half of the audience believe that is 20%, but there's also 25% of the audience that believe it's even 50%. So what do you think is the correct answer?
Well, looking at that, I think the correct answer is 20%. Around 20%. That is always the added value of adding genetics. If you look at the total phenotypical performance of a dairy cow. So in some cases, people say 50%. There's a lot of influence. Of course, genetics are important, but I think with 50%, there's a little bit overestimated.
Okay. And then we asked the audience what genetic trait they believe would be the most useful one today if you want to breed a cow that's more resistant to heat stress. 50% actually believe that this is the feed intake, and about 25% believe it's longevity. Now, which of the traits would you use to select the right cows for heat stress?
It's interesting, because if you really want to breed cows that can handle heat stress better, of course, what we see when cows face heat stress is that the feed intake is going down. So I can see from that point of view that a lot of people think that it's feed intake is the most important trait. But actually, if you want to look at cows that can handle heat stress better and easily manage heat stress, I think longevity has got the most impact on it. But it's a nice bridge, I think, to the presentation and to the story that we want to tell this afternoon.
But I assume that also for other reasons, you at CRV believe longevity is a very important genetic trait, right?
Well, of course, and I think that is the important thing of this topic this afternoon. Of course, heat stress is very important, but also when you look at breeding, there are a lot of factors, and not every day during the year cows face heat stress. So it is important to look at the total picture. But also, when you talk about improving the genetic level of your cow, you really want to improve your herd every day of the year. So in that way, it really comes close together. And I think the good news in that way is that a lot of the traits that we work with not only have an effect on heat stress, but will have a total effect on your daily business, also in periods where cows do not face heat stress.
Okay, now, genetics for many people, including myself, is always a very complicated topic. The answers to those two questions have already given us enough food for thought. So we are all really looking forward to your presentation. Joost, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and thank you. I'm Dr. Bergman. I'm the only one talking to you this afternoon that is not a doctor. I'm just a simple son of a dairy farmer with a passion for breeding ever since my dad, as a 10-year-old, let me do the sire selection for the cows that needed to be inseminated. As Dr. Bergman said, I'm working over 15 years for CRV. And I think what we want to discuss with you this afternoon is short. For those of you that do not know CRV, I want to give a short introduction on who we are, what we stand for. I will not discuss the topic what heat stress is very long, because I think Dr. Chamberlain already gave a very good explanation on that. So where I want to focus on is really when you talk about breeding, looking at which genetic traits are relevant, and how can you breed cows that handle heat stress better. I think those two main questions are the ones that I would really like to get in more in depth with you all this afternoon. So just a short start. Who is CRV? CRV is a farmers cooperative owned by 23,000 members in the Netherlands and Flanders. We date back since 1874, so already over 100 years we exist. We are represented in more than 60 countries in the world with over 50,000 customers. We have branches, daughter companies in 12 countries. And just to give you an explanation of the size of our company, we have a turnover on a yearly base from around 170 million euros. And on a yearly base, we sell about 11 million straws of semen per year. For us, it is, of course, as a cooperative, it all starts with the farmer. That is the starting point everywhere in the world for every need that the farmers have. We want to offer them the best customized genetics, but not only the genetics, also the data solutions. As a cooperative, we have been collecting data for more than 100 years, and our farmers really want us to utilize that in breeding a better herd. And when we talk about breeding a better herd, it's all about having solutions that breed a healthier and more efficient herd. So for us, that is the most important part. Now, when we talk about heat stress, and as I said, I will not go into detail there. Heat stress occurs when an animal cannot lose the heat, and there you have the stress. So what we see, and that is important for looking at the traits that you want to improve, is that those cows start eating less, production will go down, but they will also face more health issues. And I think that is the important part when you really want to breed cows that can handle heat stress better. I think the solution there is in improving the health traits, and with that, improving the longevity. So I think that's where the key comes in. When you look at the symptoms, as also described by Dr. Chamberlain, for us it's important to see that the feed intake is going down, lying time is going down as well. That's why cows have less time for rumination, but also have more issues with hoof health, for example. And on generally, you also see the milk production dropping, the health of the cows, the hoof health, but also other health issues popping up. And that is, I think, where breeding can really add more value when you look at facing heat stress. Also here, you see especially the correlation between feed intake and temperature. And the warmer it gets, the less cows start eating, and the more issues that you will be facing. Talking about the relevant traits for heat stress, first starts a little bit the background of breeding. If you really look at the phenotypical performance of a cow, that is the combination of genetics and environment. And as we said earlier in this stage, genetics determine about 20% of the phenotypical result. Looking at the environment, which is 80%, but there are a lot of topics that have influence in it. It's housing, it's feeding, it's management, what kind of diseases are in the air at that moment, is the farmer happy or whether is he unhappy. All those topics influence the total performance of a cow. So for us as a company, it is all about improving that genetic level of the cow. And with that, you can use the data that is available. So also on the picture you see on the right, it is all about using the top end of your herd and improving those traits that you really want to improve within the chain. Now, when you want to breed a heat-resistant cow, it is important to know that what we've seen in practice is that larger, more heavy cows face more issues with heat stress than a medium-sized cow with enough capacity. They can handle heat stress in a better way. What we also see is that cows that produce high volume of milk have more issues with cows producing milk with a higher components in that. So when cows produce the same amount of percentages fat and protein, or kilograms fat and protein, we see that those cows producing with higher percentages fat and protein have less issues with heat stress. So when you talk about traits that influence heat stress and breeding cows that handle heat stress better, it is about breeding cows that are average sized with high components. But also, as I mentioned earlier, it is about breeding cows that are healthy. So fertility is an important topic, of course. Improving longevity, having cows producing for many, many lactations is important, but also other health, hoof health, ketosis, and that stuff is all part of it. And that's why we also have our CRV health. Now, just a little explanation on how breeding works. We work with breeding values when you select bulls. Those breeding values are presented for every bull. When you talk about CRV traits, 100 means average of the population, and we work with a standard deviation of 4 points. So 104 means one standard deviation above the average of the population. So here you see the examples for hoof health, fertility, and other health. What does it mean? When you use bulls with 104 for hoof health, that means that their daughters will have 3% less claw problems, less hoof issues. And if you want to express that in savings per 100 cows per year, that would mean €500 savings in that way. And that same goes for fertility. One standard deviation above average means a 3% higher non-return, so a 3% higher conception on a yearly base. That is €750 per 100 cows in saving that you have. And the same, and the last point, for other health, one standard deviation above means 2% less clinical mastitis. And if you express that in savings per 100 cow per year, that is €600 savings per 100 cows. So that is how it works. So when you go in that and you look at the sires that you want to use, the bulls that you want to use, you can easily look at their breeding values. Now, why is longevity so important when you want to breed cows that handle heat stress better? It is because we know that daughters of bulls that produce for many lactations, the only way they can do that is when they naturally handle heat stress better. And as I said, heat stress is a form of stress. You also have other factors, of course, why cows are facing stress. And when you breed for longevity, those animals will have the ability to cope with any stressor better, and also concerning heat stress. So when you do that, you also know that those cows will be healthier, will be easier to manage. Fertility also very important, because fertility is of course a measurement of how quick the cow is expected to get pregnant. And when you know that cows that have a high genetic level for fertility, they will have the ability to conceive and carry the calf easier under the same levels of stress. So in that way, increasing the genetic level for fertility will also lead to cows that handle stress in a more easy way. And also one of the things what we see here in the Netherlands is that the percentage of farmers doing milk recording is very high. And as I said, we have been collecting data for more than 100 years. That also brought us a couple of unique traits that our farmers have compared to other farmers all over the world. And one of that is also persistency. And persistency is the ability of the cow to maintain milk yield after achieving the maximum milk production. And what you want is you want to have cows that do not peak at a very high level in the beginning of the lactation and then drop very fast. So you do not want the bottom line, but you really want to have those cows that may not peak that high in the beginning, but maintain their level also during the end of the lactation. And that's basically what you want. You still want them to perform with a 20 kilogram of milk per day, or 25 at day 300 after calving. Why is it important? Because what you see is that high persistent cow have a lower fluid production, higher components, but also because they peak less high, they will easily manage heat stress in that way, because they will be better holding production over the whole lactation. And that also balances the production, means that the stress levels will be more balanced through the whole lactation as well. And in that way, I think using a trait like persistency, that could really help you in breeding animals that handle heat stress in a better way. Also, what you see, and that's also one of the things that makes the data collection in the Netherlands and Flanders very unique, is the percentage of automatic milking systems is at this moment close to 50%. The advantage of that is that we have a daily milk production registration. So we'll have, on a daily basis, we have the data for milk reproduction of those cows. And what you see here is a research trait that we're currently working on. It's called resilience. And resilience is the ability of a cow to be minimally affected in its production by any external disturbance. For example, heat stress. Or that you want it to quickly return to the state it had before that disturbance came up. So in that way, that could be a trait in the near future that could really help us in breeding cows that handle any stress factor like heat stress in a better way. The good news for you, if you really want to start with it today, is that what we've seen while doing the research is that it has positive correlations with health traits like other health, but also has a very high correlation with longevity. So again, here you see that longevity really helps you in breeding cows that can handle any form of stress in a better way. So in that way, I think a very interesting trait for the future, promising trait for the future. But as I said, with the correlation with the traits that we already currently have, that could really help you in breeding a better herd. Now, then it comes to the question, knowing what traits are important, not only for handling heat stress, but also close to what you want to achieve. As a farmer, you come to the question, how can we breed that? And that you can, we always strongly advise farmers to really use all the info that is available to them. So it starts with getting a clear insight in what is the genetic potential within your herd. And one way to do it is to use genomic testing. That means that you will be DNA testing all the animals within your herd. The advantage of it when you DNA test a young calf is that you will have the exact same amount of information as what you would have from having a third calf or cow. So on a young base, you already can use the maximum potential in selecting the animals, but also in really breeding, realizing your breeding goal, but also improve the matings that you can do. So this is having a very huge impact on your farm's profitability. And then I always know, okay, testing a heifer, DNA testing a heifer costs you money. But then I always say it might cost you around 30 to 35 euros. But look at if you really need to rear that animal, you invest 1,500 euros in that same animal. So this is really a cheap way and to really make the right decisions within your herd. So it all starts with which animals do you want to breed with, and use all the information that you have. The second step, once you have determined which animals you want to breed with, you need to set up a mating plan. And that mating plan should be based on your breeding goal. You should not only look at the current issues that you have. For example, heat stress is always in a couple of days a year. You should not determine then to improve it, but no, when you start really want to improve your herd, you need to look at the long term. And you really need to set long-term goals and be consistent on that. So based on your breeding goal, on the traits that you want to improve within your herd, you should make a mating plan. And within that mating plan, you use the pedigrees, the breeding values, and of course the performance of your cattle. And when you use a program like Sire Match that we have available within CRV, you can run a mating with using every bull from every AI organization all in the world, within the world, but then you show that you have an objective plan and have the maximum genetic progress. And then after you determine which animals you want to breed with, you made that mating plan, you set the mating goal, you go over to the sire selection. And coming back to that, basically, if you have a good mating program, you just should put in every bull from every AI organization in it to maximize the genetic progress. Because based on your selection criteria, you will have the best match for your herd. And in that way, not only for inbreeding a heat resistant cow, you will also be able to really maximize the genetic progress in your herd. So for us, as I said, I hope that within this presentation we made clear what is very relevant, not only for improving heat stress, but basically in improving your your whole genetic potential within the herd. And it's not only about increasing production. What we see very often is that when farmers say we want to increase production, you always need to look at the balance. In some ways, it's better to look at the health side before, or improve longevity, or whatever. It is all about that balance for between health and efficiency. On one hand, you want to increase production, but on the other hand, we also need to make sure that cows can handle it, cows can manage it, and are easy to manage. And that is what we, as a company, stand for, and how we want to support our farmers in any part of the world, in any kind of system that they work with. So, Dr. Bergman, back to you. That was the stuff that I wanted to share with everyone, and maybe there are some questions left.
Okay, thank you, Joost. Indeed, there's a question from the audience, and that is, why do you believe smaller cows are better able to deal with heat stress? And then I would like to add from my side,
Yep.
If you start breeding for smaller cows, will they not have smaller rumens, lower dry matter intake, and produce less milk?
I think that is it's a very good question. What you've seen, and that's also what you see in other parts of the world. It's not in that way you see people starting crossbreeding. For example, in the hotter areas in the world, you also see that when the animals get too big, farmers start doing crossbreeding. For example, with Jerseys on Holsteins to reduce the size of the animals. And yes, of course, when you start breeding for smaller animals and you go to crossbreeding, in the first cross you might not lose on production, but once you continue, you might lose in production. And that is one of the reasons. And in this part we really focused on health. But we can also share a topic on the efficiency side, because it's a very interesting topic to see there. And I still think we are there just at the beginning. Increasing production, we know that also cows will get bigger. That does not necessarily mean that they are also more efficient. We see that some larger cows face more problems, but also need a higher feed intake to produce the same amount of milk. So from that way, it is not about breeding taller, smaller, or medium-sized cows. It is what you want to maximize efficiency. And in that way, you need to look at other traits. Also, longevity is important, but feed efficiency, also a breeding value that we have, is a very important point in that.
Okay. By the way, Dr. Chamberlain, can I remind you maybe to switch on your camera in case somebody still has a question for you? But a question coming from Belgium. You talk about traits that indirectly have an impact on the ability of cows to deal with heat stress. Are you going to make it easier for us in the future by developing an index for cows specifically for handling heat stress?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that's also what I try to explain with the research on the resilience part that we're doing, because I think in the end you really need to look at the whole lactation, and not only at a small part of the lactation where cows are facing a certain issue. And I think you also always need to look at, okay, what is correlating with another, and in that way, I think with our health index, we already see that that is very well correlated to heat stress. So in that way, I think we already do have it available.
Okay, and then a question maybe best answered by Dr. Chamberlain, because I know that in England there's still a lot of breeds other than Holsteins, like Jerseys, for example. Do you believe there's a difference in the tolerance of different breeds to deal with heat stress?
I wouldn't have thought within the English breeds there'll be a difference. It's very much depends on the environment in which they've grown up in. if we just look at the Holstein, we'll see that there's a difference throughout the world. Cows born and bred in Florida or in Arizona have got a much better tolerance to heat stress than cows born in the north of Europe. And indeed, cows will actually adapt as they go through the season.
Okay. And then a question from Chart van der Kooi, which probably is from the Netherlands. And it's a question for Joost. Does CRV use the SLIC gene in its breeding program? And maybe it would make sense that you briefly explain what the SLIC gene is.
Yeah, the SLIC gene is a gene that gives cows a different type of skin that they can easily manage heat, easily handle heat, but also have less issues with teak resistance. We are closely monitoring it and following it so far, and I think you can compare it with the POLT gene. Dehorning cows is another discussion. In the past, people have been looking at it, and it was always a matter of waiting till the right mating bull came by to add the gene within your population. So what we currently today still see is that the bulls that are available with that still have a much lower genetic level to use it within the program. So for us, it is more on making sure that the longevity is high enough, that the health rates are high enough when we talk about handling heat stress. And on the sideline, yeah, we are closely monitoring when an interesting bull comes by that also has the SLIC gene, but still has the genetic level that we wanted to have. We might be able to add it to our portfolio.
And would you expect that bull to appear here in Northwest Europe, or do you expect it to appear in, say, Florida, where it's a little bit hotter?
Well, in some other parts of the world, they are already using bulls with lower level in order to create that mating sire. So it is most likely that those kinds of bulls will probably show up somewhere in the Americas or United States.
Okay, so thank you for this answer. I know there's still questions coming in, but time flies when you're having fun. So I propose that we review these questions after this session and then ask the speakers to answer them, and then we'll send you the answers by mail. Also, for those who weren't able to join the full program, we'll make the recordings of the presentations available through the CRV website and also the Healthylife website. So that brings me to the end of this session. So firstly, I would like to thank both speakers for their excellent presentations. But also I would like to thank all of you for joining us. And hopefully we'll meet again in the future. For now, thank you and have a great day.